for another episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is episode number 219, being recorded on Thursday, June 11th, 2026, on another hot day. We are right here in the throes of summer, and boy oh boy are we feeling it. Got the air conditioner on, which you may be able to hear as you listen to this. Maybe with headphones you can hear it, I don't know. But I'm looking at the little sound wave here, and it looks like it's picking up a little bit. So hopefully it's not too bad, too egregious. I wasn't going to turn it off to record this, especially because we got the cats here. They're looking a little hot, and you definitely want to make sure that your pets are, excuse me, that your pets are being taken care of. Because as they say, if you're hot, they're hot. Especially our cats, they got a lot of fur, you know. So you want to make sure that no dehydration happening. Make sure you are staying hydrated. Make sure that your pets have plenty of cold water, or actually just water too. Because cold water, they say, what do they say? Warm water is better for you than cold water. I don't know. Someone said that, man. It could have been nonsense, but either way, yeah. But here we are, man. We're back. All set with my 20 favorite films of the 21st century so far. That took up, I think about 10 weeks or so, however many episodes that was. Yeah, I think it was about 10 weeks. Yeah, whatever, you figure it out. But, yeah, that was fun to do, man. It was, and it was fun to kind of talk about some of these films that I hadn't mentioned before on the show. Some of them I had brought up, and after that, after I uploaded the last episode, I went ahead and I rewatched Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life, which I hadn't seen since whenever that Criterion came out. So this was my third time watching, I think, or maybe fourth, because I got the Blu-ray initially when that came out, and I don't, for the life of me, remember if I rewatched it when it came out. But so either way, I was familiar with it, but it was great to revisit it. Just an emotionally overwhelming film, and I mean that in a positive way, but also the sound design as well, the incredible photography on that, just the way the camera just glides in and out of the scenes, and the way it just goes through these interiors right outside, and that whole area is great. The whole, the way they frame these 1950s looking neighborhoods. It feels so authentic. It feels so sincere. It's just a wonderful, wonderful film, and I definitely want to get on that to read that Terrence Malick book that came out a couple years ago that I don't know where it is. I had a tab up here for it, but now, of course, when I'm trying to find it, I can't find it. Here it is. Magic Hours, the films and hidden life of Terrence Malick, which came out in November of 2024, I believe. Yes, written by John Bleasdale, so that'll be read in due time. And perhaps before I go ahead and read that, I will give another proper viewing to Badlands and Days of Heaven. Two wonderful films, but both of them I've only seen one time. I think The Tree of Life maybe is the only one of his films I've seen more than once. I still need to watch The New World and Song to Song. The New World I have in the other room. Song to Song I know is streaming on Tubi, so I'll watch that at some point. But yeah, I also want to kind of savor them a little bit, get to them in due time, not rush through them, because Malick doesn't have a whole lot of films, but I've seen all of his other ones off the top of my head. What is it? It's Badlands, Days of Heaven, The Thin Red Line, The New World, The Tree of Life, To the Wonder, Knight of Cups, Song to Song, and A Hidden Life. I think that is all of them. Not that it matters, even if I'm wrong, I'm not going to check it. But either way, it was great to do all that, great to talk about those films. But speaking of films that I should have rewatched before reading, even though I haven't read that Malick book yet, I am almost done, I mentioned last time, with Sam Wasson's book, The Big Goodbye, Chinatown, and the Last Years of Hollywood. I have maybe I would guess 50-ish pages left from my memory, including, if we're not including, I should say, the index, the references, the bibliography in the back. But it's an excellent book so far. primarily about the making of Chinatown, but bookended by all the pre-production, or really all the, not even necessarily the pre-production, everything that led up to it, with all the main players, and then everything that happened after that. All the main players with, starting off with Polanski after the tragedy at his house with Sharon Tate, and then with what Nicholson was doing, what Robert Evans was doing, and Robert Towne, who was writing at the same time, or at that point had already written The Last Detail, also with Nicholson, from Hal Ashby, one of the great 70s films. And it makes me, in a way, I'd be interested if I would have had a stronger appreciation for the book if I had rewatched Chinatown before reading this, because I've only seen the film once, and I remember enough about it to be able to follow the book. Not that you have to, I don't even think you've had to have seen Chinatown to be able to appreciate the book. It's more about, the production of the film, yes, but it's all about just the different players here, all the different characters, and how much of a group project it is making a film. All these different egos, all these different ways of going about making a film, all kind of clashing, and then hoping for the best that it actually comes out good. Let alone if you have anything exceptional and Oscar worthy. Because it's funny when you have this film, which they talk about the big important '70s film. What comes out the same year and overshadows basically everything else? The Godfather Part 2. And that is the thing where it's almost like Chinatown is an exceptional film in its own right, but when you are eclipsed by the monolith that is The Godfather Part 2, it is hard to even follow that up. So much so that, we were talking about like the important 70s films. You can't narrow it down to one or two. When you have these different filmmakers making these different kinds of unique, exceptional, personality-driven films, than trying to limit it to just, something like just The Godfather, or just Chinatown, or even something like, what maybe not considered a new Hollywood film, but even something like Star Wars, which I would consider a new Hollywood film, just because it is a bigger. I mean, that was '77. That was right, when there was still some meat left on the new Hollywood. Because then what comes out the week after Star Wars, you have William Freakin' Sorcerer. I mean, you want to talk about new Hollywood? There it is, right there, and it's sort of ballooning into an eventual popping point. But it's great. Reading this brings to mind the great '70s films. Brings to mind the great Polanski films. Rosemary's Baby, and even not so great ones like The Fearless Vampire Killer. He talks about his frustration with the final cut of that film, and this film, Chinatown, being sort of a tug of war between him and Robert Evans, and Robert Evans as well had played a monumental part in this film, and of course Paramount at the time. So you have a companion book. I guess two companion books you could read in relation to this about Robert Evans. Well, one specifically about Robert Evans, The Kid Stays in the Picture, which was made into a documentary, which I haven't actually read that book, but I've seen the documentary, and to my knowledge, I think a lot of the passages from the book are just directly translated into the film, and I'd want to read that book, but I've read so much about Robert Evans that, which he wrote that book himself, that was his autobiography, but it'd be curious to just read a more fleshed out version of that, because I think the documentary is like probably 90 minutes or so, but it's very good. It's they talk about where that term "the kid stays in the picture" comes from, involving Evans, but as well a book I've talked about before on the show. Speaking of The Godfather, which is "Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli," which came out a couple years ago, written by Mark Seal, from 2021, which is just an exceptional cinematic look at the nightmarish production of the making of The Godfather, and the battling between really everyone against Coppola, everyone against Evans. And it's sort of a miracle that film, that Coppola stayed on until the end. He was able to complete the film, and that it came out as monumental as it was. It's interesting to sort of track these long stories about these films that end up being great. It's sort of you when you look at a long sort of story like this about making a film, it's either notable for being like a great film or being a disaster. It's not too often that you see it somewhere in between. I think of I didn't read the book, but Turner Classic Movies did a wonderful season of their podcast. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it was based off the book The Devil's Candy, which was about the making of The Bonfire of the Vanities, the Brian De Palma film with Tom Hanks, Melanie Griffith, and Bruce Willis, and that nightmarish production. And I've not seen The Bonfire of the Vanities, but to my knowledge, it is not a disaster of a film. It's just not a good film. At least that's just what I've heard. So that's... Unless it's an exceptional story like that, you'll really only see it about like, okay, this is a tale of this filmmaker who went through hell, and then makes something like Apocalypse Now and ends up being makes it all worthwhile, or something again not quite not a disaster, but something like Heaven's Gate, which I think that falls right in the middle as well. I don't think it's a disaster. I don't think it's some great film. I think it's right there in the middle that just had a really fascinating and interesting story. Or, I'm trying to think of like an example of a book that was like this long process about the making of what would be like an awful film. And I guess I can't really think of one. I'm thinking of like Ed Wood the movie, but actually not necessarily even about Plan 9 from Outer Space. And I definitely don't even think that's like an awful film. I mean, when you watch a lot of 50s sci-fi stuff, there's a lot that is just that are real bad to watch. I mean, that's why I never kind of got on board with Plan 9 from Outer Space being some so bad it's good movie, because it's got a charm that its shortcomings are able to the charm holds up the shortcomings. The bizarre dialogue delivery, the cheap set design. It's not boring. There are so many terrible 50 science fiction films that are boring, and I really don't like to use that word too much, but when I'm like actively wanting actively wanting the film to be over because I am just disinterested, and I think that is far more egregious than a film being just kind of laughable, and I don't even think Plan 9 from Outer Space is even that bad of a movie. But anyways, yeah, The Big Goodbyes. I mean, I was gonna wait until I was fully done with it, but I'm almost done with them. I'm in the section now where I talk about really what's kind of going on with these people afterwards. Specifically with Polanski and everything that happened after, and him eventually having to flee America, and the disastrous kind of family situation with Robert Towne, who, like I said, also wrote The Last Detail with Nicholson, and around the same time wrote Shampoo, the Warren Beatty film that, was that 75, I think it was? Yes, that was 75, which came out, actually also by Hal Ashby. For some reason I was thinking like, wait, did Warren Beatty direct that? No, that was Hal Ashby who directed it, which is also a great film as well. Maybe make a book about that. There was that Ashby documentary, just called Hal, that is worth watching, for sure. It goes up to the apartment, the landlord, up until being there, and it doesn't really talk much about his films after that, which is, to a lot of people, including myself, that's kind of the prime era of Hal Ashby. I know people like Quentin Tarantino are enthusiastic about 8 Million Ways to Die. Truthfully, I am not. I think I may have talked about that film on the show. I am not a fan of that film. I just, to me, Being There is the ultimate final film of a director. It's just you're going out on top with that. But then the films he did after that, he did like The Slugger's Wife, and he did Looking to Get Out, and it's just like, I don't know about that. I mean, I guess 8 Million Ways to Die was, it was his final feature film, not counting Jake's Journey from '88, which is a TV movie. But yeah, I don't know about that. And when you look at comparing it to stuff like Being There, it's just sort of like, which is funny because I'm not even the biggest fan of something like The Landlord, and I'm absolutely not a fan of Harold and Maude, which I have tried to like that film. If there was ever a film I desperately wanted to like, it was that. I've seen that film a couple times now, and maybe one day it'll click for me, but it has not clicked yet. I really am not a fan of that film. But then you have like The Last Detail, which is just so good, and it's just prime Jack Nicholson right there. And speaking of Nicholson, from his sort of run of just great films in the 70s, I rewatched Mike Nichols's Carnal Knowledge from 1971. And, of course, has to be mentioned as well, Nicholson in The Passenger from Antonioni with Maria Schneider, which is one of Antonioni's best films, and it's fascinating to read the troubled working relationship, I should say, between Nicholson and Antonioni, two great artists in their own right who have different ways of going about their art. One more loose, one more perhaps stubborn, and I don't even mean that negatively, but maybe more specific, I should say. But The Passenger is a phenomenal film. That is it's one of my favorite, not just one of my favorite Antonioni films, but one of my favorite 70s films. But the way that Nicholson in the book talks about he approaches this kind of character, sort of like letting it, feeling it out and seeing where they go with. Carnal Knowledge is a far more mannered, far more, maybe less, I don't want to say improvised, because that's not even the word I would go with, but it's far more like of a play at times, the way these characters have their interactions, where the dialogue is almost like a tennis match, where it bounces between each other, but not in a way where it's frenetic or it's big. It's very mannered, like I said. It's very matter-of-fact, the way that these characters, specifically Jonathan and Sandy, played by Nicholson and Art Garfunkel, have their conversations about women. In the opening, we have a very kind of standard opening credit sequence, black background, red text. We're going through, it feels like a long opening credit sequence, but we're just hearing the dialogue of these two, their crass dialogue about women, about their breasts and all that. And it's interesting, when you think of this sort of crass dialogue, when you go to like Nicholson, you have The Last Detail from Robert Towne, and it's a lot of cursing in the film. That's a film that also got in some trouble because of just how much cursing there was and how much they really wanted to cut out a lot of the dialogue. But that's a different type of crudeness. Here, when you have these four characters, got to mention Susan and Bobby as well, played by Candice Bergen and Anne Margaret. The way all four of them bounce off of each other is just so great. The way that Sandy and Susan first have their interaction, where Sandy is very pushy with wanting to have sex with her, where she is not quite prudish, but she's not as fast-paced as he is. The comedy comes from him kind of breaking down, sort of where they're at. He's like, well, this is the third date, so, now I got to feel you up. And it's in a way where, even when he feels up Candice Bergen, it's not particular, it's not even erotic. It's so matter-of-fact, where he just has his hand over her clothed breast, and she is just so turned off by it, and we as an audience are just laughing at it. The way there's nothing titillating about it. It's some matter of fact of, well, I'm at the point now in our dates, in our relationship, where I need to put my hand on your breast. It's very funny in that regard. The way these characters sort of have this math about relationships, about love. Also, I apologize if my voice is cracking a little, but I am drinking water right here, but it has been cracking. So I'm going to try to make sure that doesn't happen too much. But then we see Jonathan and Bobby's character, the way they interact. One of my favorite sequences in the film is when they're in their small little apartment, where John, he wants beer with his meal, and he has a little bit of a disagreement with Bobby. And they're back and forth about who's going to get the beer, is it a big deal, is it not? It's all very funny. And it's not overtly funny. It's not like big laugh-out-loud moments. It's just the way that these characters all go about with each other. They're all very magnetic to one another. And then, when I think of this film, it's not just Nicholson, it's not just Garfunkel, it's not just Bergen or Anne Margaret. It's all four of them together that equally, any one of them, could try, be the one to kind of upend and steal the show, but it all feels like an equal playing ground. It all feels very deliberate in that regard, to not have any particular actor having to steal the scene or be the big one, which is funny because I'm not even the biggest fan of some of Art Garfunkel's films. He did, I think it was Bad Timing, which was that a Peter Weir film, or was that that was Nicholas Roeg, and that is a film that kind of reminds me a little of Carnal Knowledge in that character, of a darker turn with that character, being a bit more sexually aggressive. But that's a film that just really does not work for me at all. Nicholas Roeg as well. On a little kind of side tangent, he has made some of my favorite films, and but then there's a certain point where, boy, I just check out, man. He has just some films that I don't know what he was thinking with that. Yeah, Bad Timing. I can't get on board with that one with. Oh man, he did that one that was I can't find it right now, but they were in the hotel room, and it was like was it Eureka? It's got to be Eureka, man. It's no, it's not Eureka. That's a different one. It's the one where they had the Marilyn Monroe, and they had the Albert Einstein. Insignificance. That's what it was. 1985. Boy, oh boy, yeah, that was. I don't know what he was thinking with that one, man. That is a bad film, man. I think, yeah, you have Teresa Russell in there. You have Tony Curtis. Oh, good Lord, man. I don't know what's going on with that one. That is a film I do not like, man. And how did I get on this? Nicholas Roeg. I'm going so off topic here, man. Anyways, man. Let me get back to this a little bit. I kind of lost the plot, as they say over here. But yeah, Carnal Knowledge is definitely my favorite Mike Nichols film. I would say that Mike Nichols is one that I haven't totally responded to a lot of his films. You know, I mean, I love this film and The Graduate. That's kind of where it ends for me. I like, let me see if I can pull up here. I like Silkwood, the Meryl Streep film. Damn, IMDb needs to relax with their ads, man. This is wild. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I know that's a classic film, and people enjoy it. People regard it as one of the great films. I never really responded to it. And then, you know, The Birdcage, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I never saw Closer. I'm curious to watch that. I remember when that came out in 2004. That was with, Clive Owen, I think, and Jude Law, Natalie Portman, and who was the other one? Was that Winona Ryder in that? No, that was Julia Roberts. Why was I thinking Winona Ryder? But Charlie Wilson's War was his last film in 2007, which I did like. So maybe I'll have to revisit Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because I guess that's, you know, I don't know. I guess that kind of melodrama works for some people, but just does not work for me. But I'll give it another try. If it works, great. If not, well, then, you know, you can't say I didn't give it my all. And by my all, I mean I watched it. But Carnal Knowledge, though, wonderful film. And yes, it brings to mind the other great films from Jack Nicholson in the 70s, the other great 70s films. I mean, this era has been written about so much. I mean, there are so many books about the new Hollywood, about these films that were released, about the downfall, at this point, I've become far more interested in specific makings of, whatever way you phrase it, doesn't sound right, the making of certain films from this period, whether it be Chinatown or The Godfather, because you can only reiterate the same points so many times about this era, about, the younger sort of new independents coming in, the great films they were making, the lax nature of a lot of their projects, saying, hey, go out and do what you got to do, and then, sometimes it bit them in the ass, sometimes it brought them great success, and it's interesting now, somebody else was talking about with the recent box office success of Backrooms and Obsession, people, somebody else was saying, is this the start of another era of the new Hollywood, when you have these 20-somethings, in this case we have these two, 20-somethings who were making YouTube content, and they made critically acclaimed, financially successful films, and where will that go to? And And to me, I don't. To me, for one, that's a little hyperbolic. Um, I think these two films coming out is an anomaly in terms of how many comparisons you can draw between them, because we've had successful 20 somethings making these successful kinds of movies, maybe not on a studio huge kind of scale like this, in terms of like getting picked up by a studio, even though I think A24 approached them about a Backrooms movie, where I think Obsession was picked up by Focus Features and Blumhouse. But I don't think, for one, I mean, it's subjective in terms of the quality. I don't think the quality of these films sort of matches anything that was coming out of that era, even with the given of enough time being passed. But two, I think that in the case of Obsession, what makes that feel a bit more clumsy in comparison to the New Hollywood is that with a lot of the New Hollywood films, is that these weren't films that the studios were making. None of these, well, maybe not none of them, I'd have to look at the full list, but a lot of the big New Hollywood films, like Bonnie and Clyde, like Easy Rider, they were not traditional studio movies. I mean, maybe Bonnie and Clyde in terms of just the idea of this period piece crime film, but in terms of the relationship between Beatty and Dunaway, in terms of the violence, I mean, it hadn't really been done before on a mainstream studio scale like that. And this is no knock to Obsession at all, but with a film like that, I think a studio could have made that film. When I watched it, there was nothing that particularly stood out as risk taking, or in terms of like, okay, this is out there enough that a 20-something would make something like this. Where even Backrooms, that I wasn't crazy about, that feels closer to, okay, a traditional studio probably wouldn't make a film like this because it's just so out there and strange. And that's not I can't, say again, it's not a knock on Obsession at all. Even though I wasn't really a fan of the film, that's not why. I'm just saying that in terms of like the New Hollywood kind of coming in, that could have been anyone could have made that film. In terms of just, it's very accessible to an audience. It's very much a Gen Z sort of movie, and I guess you could say, well, only a Gen Z filmmaker could have done that. And sure, okay, but that could have been any Gen Z filmmaker. But that's not to diminish its success or its, whatever like that. I'm not bringing that up to dog. I'm just saying that I think that one, the comparisons there are incredibly hyperbolic, to the point of just like you can't even take it seriously. And then two, it's just the kinds of films that are being made. But we'll see. If the studio systems now feel, excuse me, they feel so out of touch with what will draw people to a cinema. Because in the case of these two films, I mean, with Obsession, you have Curry Barker, who made videos on YouTube, did a lot of comedy stuff. I think he may have directed some episodes of some shows, or he was on some shows. I don't remember. I don't remember exactly what it was. But either way, he's well known. The film, it's being received by a younger audience, so they go online on social media and they talk about it. And so yeah, they're going to want to flock to see it. They're going to want to see it with a packed cinema. And then in the case of Backrooms, when you have, Kane Parsons, who made this online series people know about, they have this whole lore, this whole world building, that makes sense. You're a younger audience. Younger audience will want to go and see these in the theaters, because there's an excitement around it. That's why when something like a Minecraft movie comes out, even if it's for a joke, the younger audience, when I say younger, I mean like 20-something and all that, will go and see it. But in terms of like the big studio movies, I mean, I don't think younger people are flocking to the newest Star Wars or to Masters of the Universe. Whether you like or dislike these movies, I just don't think there's that much of an appeal. So at least on a wide scale. So when they're underperforming, it's not really surprising. But I'm losing my voice, and I have more points to make, but I am running out of time here, so I'm going to wrap it up. Maybe we're going to talk about it more next time. But anyways, you guys take care, stay hydrated, stay cool. I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to drink this water and play with the cats. So all the best. Until next time, everybody.